Coming in hot, I'm your host and captain of the Reason to Reason podcast, Sal Galati. We're going to do something a little bit different. You're just going to get a taste, a dose of reason. Welcome back. Sorry it's been a while. Got plenty of ideas, just been busy. I got to have the time and I got to be kind of in the right mindset to do one of these. And I don't want to compromise on the quality, compromise on the effort, and just start spitting out shows just to put out a show. Today we're going to do a show on Halloween, and it's obviously timely because Halloween's coming up. And I'm not one to say, oh, you can't celebrate Halloween, it's a pagan holiday, this and that. I was going to do an episode talking about the history and some observations that I've made and a deeper understanding of what's going on, because I think everyone would agree from 20, 30 years ago to now, it's very different. The decorations on the houses is over the top, and it's fun sometimes, but sometimes it's kind of demented. See like really bizarre things. People with kids in the home, and they got like a man with a knife sticking in his head and blood on the grass. I mean, I would imagine 20 years ago the authorities would be called in on that individual. But let's do a little history first. Halloween. It says its origins come from like 2,000 years back, ancient Celtic festival pronounced Samhain. And it was a harvest festival. And, had to do with like most pagan type things. It's dark. It marked the end of the harvest season, the beginning of the dark half of the year. And they felt like this time of year, there was like a boundary between the living and the dead. And the theory goes that this time of year when the darkness was setting in, that this realm, this doorway between the spirit world and the world here, spirits would be roaming around doing things, and they would do certain things to ward them off. People would light fires, people would dress in animal skins, and then the Roman Empire came to pass, and they kind of melded it with some of their festivals, honoring the dead. And then the Christian, and I don't necessarily agree with this is called syncretism. Paul warns against it. He warns against it in the letter to the Colossians. Essentially, don't meld the truth of the gospel with traditions. Not because it makes you bad, but inevitably what happens is you kick out the truth of what the symbols are supposed to symbolize, and you just focus on the symbols. Prime examples like the Christmas tree. We talked about another episode. You could look way back when, and actually we're coming up on a year, which is crazy. I got a couple good ideas to do for our year anniversary, but there's an episode called Christ is Greater Than Christmas, and kind of talk about the history of like why is Jesus' birth celebrated on Christmas Day, December 25th, and why maybe it shouldn't, and maybe why we should take Christ out of Christmas. Because now it's about this tree in the house and Santa Claus coming down the chimney, which is fine and fun, but that has nothing to do with Jesus, and it never did. And you start bringing that in, and inevitably through the generations, now you just got the tree and Santa Claus, and Jesus is left out in the cold. So that's why we're told not to do it, because as people, we like these symbols, but we forget what the symbols stand for. But the Pope Gregory III made it All Saints Day, try to bring in this pagan thing into Christianity. And then America took it over and kind of did with it what it is now. And it's continuing to devolve. I was actually talking to someone that was from England visiting for work, and he said, they celebrate Halloween there too. It's actually kind of where it originated, but the decorations are just starting to hit the houses now. Like that's like a very new thing, and we were talking about how it's going to continue to devolve, and he agreed. Sooner or later they're going to have the man with a knife in his head in the front yard. This show is officially sponsored by American Rose Coffee. They're not just a coffee company. They're about fueling bold ideas and real conversations. Every roast is crafted for people who think deeply, challenge the norm, and live with purpose. If you want coffee that matches that mindset, head to AmericanRoseCoffee.com. That's American Rose Coffee. Bold coffee, bold conversations. So what is going on? You could just say, oh, people are twisted, they're demonic. I don't think that is. I met the individuals that have these decorations. They seem nice. I think what's going on is that there's no doubting that people fear death, and we don't deal with it very well. You don't talk about it. I told you a story once where the guy that I'd known well, the son comes in. I've been trying to share the gospel with him. His son runs in saying he's afraid his dad's going to die, and I'm like, so what did you tell him? He goes, I'm never going to die. And that's what we do. We lie to our kids. We hide. We just say, oh, they're in a better place. We don't want to think about it, and it's because we fear it. All right. And so what brought it home, I had these thoughts for a while, but I'm having a conversation with a guy, and he's telling me that his son is struggling with depression. And, I don't know him too well. And I'm just kind of coaching him up and telling him, hang with your boy, talk to him. We all struggle with depression to a certain extent, but love him and care for him. And I just said, try to steer clear from these drugs. And he agreed with that. And then he segued into how excited he was about his Halloween decorations. And he mentioned a scene in his front yard of a bunch of skeletons playing baseball, and they're using the skull as the ball. And I mean, I didn't know him well enough. And actually, usually I don't bite my tongue, but it was a touchy subject with his son. But I certainly feared death when I was younger. I didn't talk to anyone about it, but it preoccupied my mind. I was always thinking about the darkness, the nothingness, the emptiness of death. Like, what's the point? Why are we even here? It made no sense to me, but I was always afraid to talk about it. And I'm pretty certain this kid has thought about it. Pretty certain he hasn't talked to anyone about it. And now you have, like, you're mocking death in the front yard. So that's the big sum of my thought processes. This is an effort for people who fear death to mock it. And death is one of those things that it's really outside of the biblical worldview, there's not really an explanation for it. They don't quite understand why it is that if you keep feeding your body and treating it well and giving it water, that it couldn't continue to replicate. Obviously, there's a process of aging, but they don't understand why. The Bible provides an answer, though. Death entered the world through sin. Let me read this is from Genesis 2:17. And God said, "But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die." Now, he didn't mean, obviously, you're going to die that moment, because Adam didn't die that moment, but death enters the world through that disobedience. Sin is a separation from God, who's holy and perfect. God cannot die, but once we allowed sin to enter, death also entered. Paul puts it, and again, this isn't a proof, but this is the biblical explanation. Paul puts it as the wages of sin is death, meaning we are owed death through our disobedience. And now, obviously, there's a restorative process. There's a way that we could be reconciled and atoned for. We talked about in other episodes, which is the miracle of his son coming, living a perfect life, bearing all the punishment of the world on himself, and we inherit his righteousness, not by our works, but what he accomplished. That's the gospel. That's a big part of why I started the show, to get that message out there. But in mocking death, in trying to obfuscate it and marginalize it, we don't confront this reality. And I think that's really what's going on. I think we're mocking death. I think it's not hard to see that we've degraded the value of life in our society. And now you have kids walking around in a neighborhood, and it's like you're in a graveyard with skeletons coming out of the ground. Yeah, it's fine. I don't want to make it sound like I'm a prude about it, but let's get down deep as to why this is going on. It would have been very bizarre 30 years ago, but now it's not bizarre. So what's going on in the culture that we find this to be okay? I was making an observation that one of the few things I watch on TV is football on Sundays. So Sunday at noon, I'm watching a Bears game, and pretty much every other commercial break, I got to ask my kids to cover their eyes, because there is some insane, bizarre, twisted violence, gore on Sunday at noon on network TV. Now, wherever you are on a political spectrum, can we not agree that maybe that stuff should be like after 8, 9, or maybe it should be on cable, or maybe it should be on channels that have horror movies? I mean, I don't even think it's your target audience that wants to watch these movies watching it. So what's going on? It's like the drug ads. It's like funny. You have this commercial, and you don't even know what the drug's for, but maybe it's not. I mean, they're spending money on an ad. You think they want the people to know what the drug is. But maybe it's not about selling the drug per se. It's just giving money to the network so they don't cover them accurately and tell them all the health ramifications that are going on in our society, because the drugs are actually not as great as they present. I don't know, just food for thought. But couldn't we get behind that? So if I suggest let's get these types of commercials off at that time of the day, I'm a maniac. But we're happy to just give like drugs to kids at 7, 8, 9 years old, put them on a drug with no off ramp. Like, this is their life for the rest of their life. They're on drugs until they die. That no one has a problem with. So that all said, have a happy Halloween. Enjoy your time with your friends and family and however you celebrate it. Don't argue with people. Oh, it's actually a Christian holiday. It's All Saints Day. That's not quite the history. Don't bicker about nonsense like that. But understand, are we desensitizing our children to death? And death is a reminder of our sin. And instead of mocking it and running from it, let's confront it, deal with it, and look up to God, our Savior, of how he's reconciled us to him. Maybe there is a distraction going on. Maybe we are mocking it. Maybe we should understand why we die and face it honestly, like men, like adults, and don't have our kids think it's a joke, because it's not. Talk to you soon. If you like that little dose of reason and you want to hear some more, there's some longer episodes in the library. Check them out. Send in your ideas, reasonstoreason@gmail.com. Share it, pass it along, keep talking. Peace.
Sing it!
Thanks for joining us for another episode. I hope I got you thinking and out of your comfort zone. Believe me, the biggest fear your government has is a population that is thinking and talking to one another. So get out there, take a risk, start a conversation, make a friend, and reason with each other. Share the show with someone who you think needs to hear it. I wish you peace and love.